integrated task force was a drop on request program. They couldn't force you to be there because we were volunteers. So basically I could wake up any day and be like, okay, I'm done. And we would just leave. And then that data would count against females. It would be like, didn't make it, couldn't hack it, whatever, like doesn't want to do it. And so that was always something that we had to be cautious of, is that you're representing, females across the Marine Corps, period. Like you're trying to determine. So that's why they pick these like most physically fit females to like compete. And I think it was, would we ever be good enough?
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that serve. This is the first episode, and I am joined today by Courtney Glen White. She is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories, and their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. The first question I have, and it's going to be the question that I ask everybody, is why did you join the Marine Corps?
So I graduated high school in 2007, and I jumped straight into community college. I took all my prereq classes, took an extra year, right? Like was a little slow. And then I was applying to 4-year universities, and I didn't have any money. I knew I didn't want loans. And that previous year, I actually went to Marine Corps Ball with a guy that I went to high school with. And I remember thinking it was like one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. I loved like, they played the video and it was just super moto and the camaraderie. And I was like, I think I could do that. And then I told all my friends and my family, and they were like, oh girl, no, like you would never make it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm going to do it anyways. So I went to the recruiting station and I was like, I can do this. I can totally do this. And they were like, okay, well, let's test you out and see if you're qualified. And I scored really high on the East, which is the practice exam. I was like, see, I could do this. And then I went to the first physical fitness kind of like PT session, and I got absolutely slayed. And I went home and I cried to my mom, and my mom was like, well, I guess that's not going to happen. But the recruiter before I left had told me, like, if this is something you really want, the only thing you have to do is like show up and give 100%, even if it's not like the craziest thing, like you're not the fastest person, that's completely fine. So then the next morning I woke up, never been so sore in my entire life. And I went back to the recruiting station and I kept going back. And then I ended up joining. I held off for the public affairs contract because they didn't have it in my fiscal year. So I ended up shipping in October of 2010. But yeah, I guess it was more for school, but more for like the challenge.
And especially probably the people telling you couldn't do it, like driving that. And I learned something. I didn't know that you had to wait for public affairs either, because that's something that was, I thought, unique to me. I waited for public affairs. It was like, that's the job that I want. That's the career field.
I know. I remember looking, like I went online, I'm like, jobs in the Marine Corps. And I remember reading them all and I was like, this is a job I could do. And so I was like, that's a job I want to do. And then I got it. And it was the best decision I made in the Marine Corps.
And what's cool is the trend to at least being somebody on the outside who's seen your career progression and how it started with education. And it's kind of like that drive for continued education has been something that's been a driving force for you, right?
It has. So my mom grew up like in the San Ysidro, Chula Vista area in California, but she's originally from Mexico. My grandparents are from Mexico. And I just remember hearing stories growing up that like my grandmother only went to the 2nd grade before she basically had to like stop going to work. Like she was sweeping and washing dishes and stuff at these restaurants because they had to provide for the family. And my mom, she graduated high school, but, life happened and she really didn't get like to further her education. So my mom always stressed how important it was. And for me, I was like, okay, like I will get like my degree. Like I promise, like even if I join, like I will finish it. And so I don't know, my mom told me like growing up, it was like, if you lose everything, they can't take like your knowledge. So that's like the one thing that you can have forever. And so I've kind of kept with that. And then now I'm deemed a terminal student, but I mean, I don't hate it. I like learning, so can't complain.
And one of the things you're really good at too is not just learning, but like taking that knowledge in personally and teaching somebody else how to do it. I mean, that was something that I think you and I really bonded when we were both on MPA duty, which is marketing and public affairs duty, because you were the one that trained me how to do that job, even though you were like 4 hours away from me or something like that. You came to my recruiting station, pretty much told my CEO, I was like, hey, got it, like leave us alone, I've got things to teach her. And you were teaching the stuff that was it kind of in our career field, yes, but it wasn't anything we had ever done before, and definitely not on the scope of what we were doing it. And I think that that's something that like, it's great being somebody who can take knowledge in, but like even more than that, like you're able to teach other people that knowledge. And it's, I think it works really well in the Marine Corps, because obviously that's what you're doing as a leader in the Marine Corps. And as you get up in rank in NCO and now staff NCO, that's something you're having to do to your junior Marines. And it's awesome to see. And it's awesome to see you, so with your career field, you got the opportunity to go to Syracuse, correct? And how was that program, and kind of what's the uniqueness of that program in the Marine Corps?
So Syracuse it was open to all services and they would send it, but funding has been cut over the years for some of the branches. So I know the Navy and the Marine Corps are still attending, but the advanced visual journalism program, you go to Syracuse for about 10 months, 10, 11 months, technically, depending on when your orders are cut. And you go and you are either in a photo program or a video program. So I was in motion media, and then they just created a graphics program this year. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that. But you go and you learn from like actual educators, people in the field, and like get like advanced skills in either photography, graphic design, or motion media. So when I went, I'm taught by Dr. Doug Quinn, who has worked on Lord of the Rings. He worked on Jurassic Park. This man's done everything. So it's kind of crazy. And then like some of the photographer like instructors work for National Geographic. They like, it's crazy the skill that is provided to us. But I took cinematography classes, sound design classes, kind of like creating stories, how to like write scripts. So you get a whole, I don't know, like it's just very fulfilling. Like you learn specific things to your job in DINFOS. So going to Syracuse, you got to use your imagination a little more and do a little more creating, a little more scripted stuff. So it was an experience.
And I failed to, I think, say what DINFOS is. So DINFOS is, for those who don't know, the Defense Information School, and it's where all the branches send their public affairs, their what most people know is like combat camera, artist, kind of those career fields all go to the same school. And what's extremely unique with Courtney too is you came in as public affairs, and then you got out of the Marine Corps and came back in, and it was a whole different job field.
So I am probably one of the most unique cases. So I was public affairs. I left, I came back in, and at that time there were no boat spaces. So like availability to re-enlist in the public affairs side. So I ended up going to the 46 side, which was the combat camera side. So I technically was a 43, which was public affairs, then the 46. And then we merged together and I became a 45. So I held all three of them, but it's a little bit of jumping around, but it's all basically now the same type of job that I came in wanting. So there's, it's still good.
And what's also, I'm going to try and stop saying unique, but I mean, that's what your career is. Your career is really unique, and you had the opportunity, or not the opportunity, you actually volunteered for the
Combat Element Integrated Task Force. Yes.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think that your experiences with doing public affairs and, being in Japan and the places that you were at, that was something that you then volunteered for. And it just like kind of was the wrap up, maybe I'm not saying that right, but that experience, and like, why did you volunteer for it first of all, and then how your experience was?
I would say I was a little motivator when I first came in the Marine Corps. I was very like active. I wanted to be involved in everything. I worked in the single Marine program in for like the whole Asian Pacific region. And then I went to MAC duty or MPA duty. They change the name all the time. So working in Atlanta, and I have who is now one of my huge mentors is Colonel McCutcheon. And we were discussing that they were opening up like infantry jobs and combat jobs to females, which had previously been closed. And he was like, that's an awesome experience, White. You really need to consider this. Like, you know, you have a high PFT, high CFT, you're very educated, like you're a go-getter. Like, I think this is something you should do. And I remember sitting at my desk and he's like telling me this. And I was like, he's like, you would make history. And it's not so much make history, but it's like, okay, like someone has to do it. Someone has to open that door if it is going to get opened. And I was like, you know, that's an experience that not many people say that they could do. So I remember filling out this like online questionnaire or sending in an email saying like, hey, I'm interested, like blah, 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 send. And I was like, well, that's, you know, out of everyone in the Marine Corps, they're just going to pick like this, like at that point I was a corporal. And I was like, yeah, that's never going to happen. And then fast forward, right? I was scanning something at the office, and when you scan it, it goes to your spam. And so I checked my email after I scanned this document, and there was two emails, one with a scan, and then this other one that said like, congratulations, something, something in like the headline. And I remember being like, yo, we get like spam emails in work. So I don't know why I opened it, right? And it's like, congratulations, you've been selected to be an 0331 machine gunner for the Ground Combat Element Integrated Task Force. And I remember sitting at my desk, like so shocked, like could not respond, staring at the screen. And then my exo walks in and he's like, what does that look? And I just like was staring at the screen. And then the CO came like right behind him and was like, what is she looking at? And he walks around the desk and is reading it. And he's like, this is the coolest thing ever. This man leaves the room, comes back with like, so he's an infantry officer, like all these books on like SOI and machine gunning and all these different types of weapons and like the history. And I was like, what did I sign up for? So fast forward, we trained in with 2nd Marine Division in Camp Lejeune. And then we did all these workups. I've never, like, I thought Poolie PT, right? Like when I was joining was bad. Like they teach you everything. And these are guys, like a lot of my team had deployed multiple times. They've done this in real life. You know, we were in the middle of like the Iraq-Afghanistan war. They've deployed, they've actually done this stuff. And you have all these like essentially like new females that they have to like incorporate and put up to speed. And I remember like, I was getting ready to take a shower one day and I like looked at my legs and my body and I was just like bruised, like I got hit by a truck, and it was so wild. And then so the culminating thing was that they were going to test how females compared to males. So essentially they flew us out to 29 Palms and we did what would be workups. So we did like, so I was with weapons company, and then you go out there and you do either the 240 range or the 50 cal range. And then they assess you in groups of like, so there would be a team of like 3 females. And then they assess that with, if it was 2 females and a male, and then 2 males and a female, and then an all male team. So they would do that. And I don't even know how long it felt like we were out there for, you know, my entire enlistment. It was so crazy. And they did all that and ended up getting injured. I fell on a 50 cal hike and I was on crutches for a majority of the time, left in 29 Palms, and had to kind of like take a break, went to Bridgeport, was able to push through and do all of that. And essentially out there, we did the summer package. So it's a lot of like rock climbing, like how to rope, just wild stuff that I never thought I'd get to experience. And now you're getting assessed on like your ability to do that. And it was like a lot of hiking, but it was a very tiresome experience. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to go into. That's kind of just like how I went into it.
I
But
think one of the questions I have is going into it either right before or like as it started, what was one of your biggest fears that would come of it, or what was one of the things that you were most concerned about in doing it?
so when you did the integrated task force was a drop on request program. They couldn't force you to be there because we were volunteers. So basically I could wake up any day and be like, okay, I'm done. And we would just leave. And then that data would count against females. It would be like, didn't make it, couldn't hack it, whatever, like doesn't want to do it. And so that was always something that we had to be cautious of, is that you're representing, females across the Marine Corps, period. Like you're trying to determine, so that's why they picked these like most physically fit females to like compete. And that was when they ended up opening it, they're like, do you want to lat move? Like, do you want to switch jobs and do this permanently? And like, for me, it was like, I don't know if I would want, to be in charge of a squad and know that I was so far behind what my peers at that level would be. So I think it was not like an imposter syndrome type thing, but it was like, would we ever be good enough? But when we got to the unit, I think there was a lot of assumptions in the infantry community about females in the Marine Corps. And a lot of the guys just did not talk to us. Like their wives were really worried about us joining the unit. And, they're like, well, they're probably just gonna like not really work that hard. And I felt like the command as well was just not supportive of females being there. And everyone wanted the data to show that the infantry should be and should remain all male. So that was something that we fought the entire time, was just trying to prove our worth and like actually provide data that was sufficient that they could make, the best decision based on the information that they're provided.
And I think that's a lot of weight too to carry. You said like you're not really at that point even representing yourself. You're representing like all females in the Marine Corps, and that like if you chose to stop for whatever reason, it's not you choosing to stop. It's a mark against females in the Marine Corps and whether or not they can do that job. And that has to be like a huge, like on top of everything else, this huge additional burden, or at least weight. And holy crap, I commend you even more, because I don't think we've even talked about it that way. I think that because of our relationship, we've talked a ton about the negative, but like the super deep negative, right? Because that's conversations that maybe one day we could have over a podcast, but is more like female Marine to female Marine, and just like where you need to get things off of your chest and you need to say things because we understand to an extent, because that's what we go through as female Marines. But to hear it put that way, like I didn't even think about that. Like you were literally representing me and all the rest of the females in the Marine Corps. And thank you for the awesome job you did. Like seriously.
Yeah. So when you think about it, there were quite a lot of females that did drop on request. They got injured, they got pulled from the program. But so my tent mate there was like 2 people per tent in 29 Palms when we were out in the 400 ranges. And it was Letty Jaime. She's still in. She's a gunny out here in Pendleton. But she was my tent mate, and we would go into the tent. We would be extremely dirty, just tired, bruised. And we're like, all right, tomorrow's like, you just got to make it through tomorrow. And then it's like, when I've never been so exhausted. Like I thought that I had experienced as much as I have experienced, and like I've run marathons and done all this stuff, but it was like, I did that and I would go back to my tent, and it's like, I felt like I blinked and then the next day would be there and I would have to do it all over again. And it was exhausting. And so the support of like having her, but like sometimes I was at wit's end and I was like, I need to just stop. Like I cannot do this anymore. And Sergeant Major Fortner, who was the Sergeant Major of the unit, would literally, I feel like she had a sixth sense. She would just pop out on like that day that I was at the end. And she's like, White, you're doing it. You're out here. You're getting it. Like, I believe in you. And I'm like, oh man, like I was going to quit. I mean, I probably wouldn't have ever quit, but it was that push of motivation that we needed, because we did have like that female leadership, and she was so motivated that we're just like, okay, like we can do one more day. And then eventually all that time passed and we finished. And it's like one of those things that I can say that I'm really proud is that I never gave up, even though I really wanted to sometimes.
Which I'm sure is like a positive of it, that like, that you've gone, because that's kind of how I feel like a lot of Marines feel about the Marine Corps in general. Like, you've gone through this shit, so you can go through all this other shit, right? Like at the end of the day, like I've gone through all this shit, like I can do this, and I can push through. What was something positive about it that you took from it, either personally or even just like relationships? Because that's something that like, I said at the beginning of the podcast, like that's why I wanted to do this, because I have friendships, and like friendship seems like such a weak expression for what these relationships are in the Marine Corps. But what was something that you got out of that experience that was super positive?
100%. The reason I stay in the Marine Corps and the reason that I do like a lot of the stuff that I do is the people. So coincidentally, I'm going to a promotion in a couple of hours. Jake Turner, he was a mortarman in the ITF. We've been friends ever since. Letty Jaime is going with me. So she was another machine gunner with me. We're getting a couple other people from that unit are just like, we're all still talking. We're all still involved, kind of just follow them on social media if they're far away, but it's nice to have those relationships. They reach out, you talk to them, but it's something that we will always have, an experience that we always had. But those people and like the people that made it to the end are some of like the best friends that I have. So can't take that away. And then it was interesting to see, and I think I got a bigger appreciation for my own job in the fact that I, when we deploy, we're working, but it's like typically a 9 to 5. You work on the weekends and you have some late shoots sometimes, but it's like, I'm not sleeping out in the field, like using baby wipes to like shower for like days on end, like eating MREs. Like I do have it really, really good in the Marine Corps, so I can't complain much. So it was appreciation of my job and appreciation for the people that we do have out there in the field doing the jobs that they do, because it is not easy. Not like only as a female, but as a male, like it's exhausting for people in general. And so kind of seeing that combat side was the appreciation of, our frontline forces.
And you said that while you were doing this training, you ended up injured, and that injury kind of actually led you down a different path where you ended up getting out of the Marine Corps. Can you tell me more about that and the decision, and then what you were doing when you were outside of the Marine Corps?
So this is like the craziest story to me. So I knew I had gone and used tuition assistance the entire time I was in the Marine Corps. And I was like, I'm so close, but not close enough to getting my bachelor's degree. I really want to finish. So that was always something that I was like, maybe I would take a break, and they had a sabbatical program. And I was like, I should apply for this. And then when I was applying, they pulled the program, which would have been a year off, to like, you basically stop your career, you go, you do whatever, you come back and your career starts again. Like it was just the next day, like that whole year just didn't happen. So that was my intention. I went to 29 Palms, got hairline fractures on my hips, and kind of just pushed through that to make it to the end. And eventually, like I got to the point where, at this point I have like no cartilage in my hips. Like it's very painful, like to run as much as I do now. And so, right. So rewind a little, I was coming to the end of that contract. I was up for reenlistment, got approved. I was a tier 1 Marine. And when we were at Bridgeport was when the Nepal accident happened. And a girl that we went to the schoolhouse with, Sarah Medina, had passed away, and Jacob Hug, who was also in our OC field. And it was something that really was just, it was hard for me to process. It was a female with similar upbringing in our job field. She literally was in the duty station that I had been in previously. And it was a mixture of a whole bunch of things. So it was the sadness of that. And it was picturing had someone had to come to my mom's house and tell them that I always told my mom, like, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And I think this was my first rude awakening that like every job in the Marine Corps has the opportunity to be very dangerous. And so it was a mixture between that, being injured, like I was going to physical therapy all the time, and just wanting to finish my education, that I decided to step away. And I had applied to all these schools and I got in to every school, and I ended up going to the University of South Carolina, which was conveniently located 20 minutes away from you. So couldn't complain.
I was about to say, I remember when you were going through that process and everybody was approving, and I was just like, please go to Columbia, please, please, please. And how huge that was. And I think especially like our relationship at that point was like super solid. I mean, you spent so much time with Odin and stuff, but I think it was at that point where on another level where you realize like that these relationships, how far they're going to go past the Marine Corps too, which again, with after Medina passing and that experience, I think for all of us in the career field, even those of us who didn't know her as well, we knew somebody who did extremely well. And just seeing that impact across the board was just like you said, I mean, it was like rocking your entire world almost. Like, even though you're in the Marine Corps and you see all these other things, to see it firsthand was just like, yeah. And then for us, obviously, Lopez's passing, which was like so unexpected. And for me, I think like where you were with Medina, that's where it hit me with him even more, because I had a relationship where we texted almost every day. You know, we had all these phone calls and these conversations, and to see that, and then to have a relationship with somebody like you, and it's just like, man, we made this choice, right? And like you said, like any job field, like this could literally happen at any point. And I guess that's life too, but I don't know, it hits you in a different way.
Yeah. So Michael Lopez was a little ahead of me. He had graduated the schoolhouse, and then we were in Okie together, and then we ended up in the 6th Marine Corps District together, and he was in Fort Lauderdale. So I mean, I could drive to you, but for him, it was like he came over to our station for a little while so I could train him as well. But it was on the phone all the time. And I remember finding out that he had passed, and it was like the most shocking news to me, though, because I was like, no. Like, I had just texted him. Like, I'm like looking at these texts, and it say like, he texted me at like, the last thing we said, it was like 10:23. And then he ended up passing like that morning. That it was just, that is another one that I think will forever be in my heart. And like, I still talk to Sue, his mom, often, but we still, I mean, remember these people. But those are ones that I feel like till the end of time, like everything that I do like in remembrance of the fact that like I am still alive and lucky enough to be able to participate in the things that I do. And I don't take for granted the people who do not have those opportunities.
And do you think that was a driving force at you deciding to re-enlist again? Because I mean, I think that like you were going to school, like you're a full-time student, you're studying, complete freedom, right? Like complete freedom, experiencing all of the things students experience, like a drunken guy breaking into your apartment and sleeping in your bed. Like the life was completely different, but not all the same. And then you decided to join back, and kind of like, what was that process, and how are you now that you're back in the Marine Corps? You recently just got, well, not recently, but a while ago you were promoted, and then you just re-enlisted again, and kind of how that comes full circle, or how you get back to that point, especially with all of that darkness and emotions and things that like, it's rough in the Marine Corps, right? Like all of that.
So when I originally had enlisted, I was like 4 years and done. And then I ended up extending, and then got out, and I went to the University of South Carolina, and I studied public relations because it was very similar to public affairs. And I absolutely loved my time. I think that the Marine Corps put me in this different standard of what was acceptable in terms of work ethic. And so I was trying to get the most out of my GI Bill. So I was taking like 8 classes, like 2-3 more classes than some of the other people in my class to kind of catch up and match where they were. And I worked really hard. I joined a sorority, didn't last long. It was not the friendships that I like. Great girls, great girls, like super awesome. But I think that the way that like I partied and the way that I interacted with my friends was not at the level of that. So I just didn't think that that worked. So that lasted like a semester, but I try to get involved with as much stuff as possible. Student Veterans Association was very important to me, but I ended up coming up on graduation, and I was student of the year at South Carolina. I graduated with honors, and I was the second most decorated person at graduation, like for the college. And they were like, you're just so hardworking, all this stuff. They're like, I just like, no, like, how did you do it? And I was like, this is what the Marine Corps taught me, was that like, you can always take on more. Like there was always enough time. Like you just had to be able to allocate your time properly to be able to do something. And so I thought I was doing what was normal. And apparently everyone else is looking at me like a crackhead. Like, why is she taking so many classes? That she's like, when does she sleep? And I ended up getting an extremely high GPA. And coming on graduation, Professor Griggs was saying, hey, there's this new program at West Virginia for integrated marketing communications. I know you were thinking of going to grad school. Like, would that be something you're interested in? They were talking about pairing it up with the Defense Information School and kind of connecting it like that. And I know you had gone to that school. And I was like, that would be awesome. Like, I think I'm going to go to grad school. Like, this works. And then I was still in the marketing and public affairs group where everyone who was still out there at those recruiting substations, you know, doing the marketing stuff, and people would ask questions, and I was always involved in saying like, hey, this is how I did it. You know, I wasn't in, but still kind of get that, still being able to mentor people. And they really listened to what I said. A lot of people complained in that group. And I think that was like one of the things, is that I could provide them with stuff like, okay, at the end of the day, we all know like this job sucks, it's hard, whatever people say, but like they're asking a genuine question. Like someone else is reaching out for help. And it's like, sometimes I was the only one to respond that was like something somewhat beneficial. And then at that time, Gunner Sergeant Cronenberg, who worked at MCRIC headquarters, so Marine Corps Recruiting Command in Quantico, was like, hey, I'm looking for someone. Is anyone interested? And I just remember reading that and I was like, am I interested? And so I remember hitting him up and I was like, hey, you know, I'm interested, but I got out. And he said, girl, I can get you back in. Like we can work on that. Like this is where it all happens anyways. And so I really had to think about it. So I ended up going to West Virginia online so I could do that at the same time, and went back into the Marine Corps at MCRIC and was putting in my PSET package, which is prior service enlistment package program. I don't know. And so I had to wait for that. But I think the second that I put my uniform on, I feel like I had the experience of everyone who's EASing and they're excited for the next step and everything. And I enjoyed my time at college, but there was something missing. Like I wasn't getting the fulfillment that I felt like I got when I went on these training exercises, or I had Marines, or like you get to pin someone on for promotion, or like you get to see them reenlist and like continue their career. Like I wasn't getting that satisfaction like in every normal day interaction. I got job offers right out of college, but I decided to take another leap of faith and come back into the Marine Corps. And, you know, now Master Sergeant Cronenberg and I are still very good friends. I joke about it all the time. He is one of my mentors, but like, he's the reason that I'm back in, and I'm extremely grateful to have him and Tavia, his wife, like, and their kids in my life. And they're just one of those people who will always be there for me, that I visit every time I'm like in town. But it's like, yeah, he changed my life by allowing me the opportunity to come back and realize what I was missing.
And with that, that's kind of perfect segue, because you're one of the unique people that like did actually join the Marine Corps again. But one of the questions in this podcast that we'd like to ask everybody is, if you had that choice again, to make that choice the first time, would you make it again?
That's like, so it's like a double-edged sword, I guess. Like, there's a lot of stuff about the Marine Corps that I really love. I honestly love the people. I love being a servant leader. I will forever believe that that is my leadership style. I put my Marines first always. Like, I care about everyone. I try to remember their birthdays. I try to, be involved, congratulate them on buying a new house, congratulate them on getting married, like help them when their pay is messed up. And I always put them first. And there's a satisfaction that I get of being that person that helps them, that they can come to, that they can call me in the middle of the night if they're going through something. And it's like, I love that stuff. But then I think about it, and like, to be honest, like brutally honest, sometimes it's very difficult. Like, I enlisted, I was at my max weight and have struggled with my weight the entire time I've been in. And so sometimes it's thinking that my self-worth and like my ability to be a good Marine is based on a number on a scale. So to me, that's been something that's loomed over my career the entire time that I've been in. And it's a difficult thing. Like my body, it like, I used to hike with, the 50 cal receiver, all the packs and like everything. And it's like, I can do all this stuff. I used to run a 19-minute, 5K, and I can do all of these things, but still at the end of the day, if my number doesn't match what they have, then like, now it's like, I'm a horrible Marine. And so it's kind of always that anxiety of having that. But at the end of the day, like everything I deal with, all the negatives and stuff, like 100% would always come back in. Like, it changed my life and like has helped me in so many ways beyond possible, like to explain like how I've changed as a person. So there's stuff that I would change if I ever become, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. If we need a female representative, like I'm here. I don't know if I'll stay in 30 years, but there's definitely stuff that we need to continue working on. But I think the progression that the Marine Corps is going in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the allowing of like females in combat jobs and being more inclusive and diverse, like I like the way that we're going. And so, yeah, I would definitely join again, and I will continue. Like, I obviously just reenlisted, so they've got me for another 4 years at least, but that close to retirement, they've got me for at least another 7.
And I think that's one of the things too. I think sometimes people think that like, just because like you love something or in something that you have to agree with everything. And like, I don't know, I feel like it's such a Marine thing to be the opposite, to be instead like, I love this so much, we need to fix this, and we need to fix this, and we need to change this. I feel like that's where maybe the real love is, or maybe where like Marines are better than everybody else, because we're all like, yeah, no, the Marine Corps is not good enough yet, because we can always be better. And so I think that was the perfect way to kind of like end this and to share your story. And I'm so grateful that I got to share a bit of your story and that you were willing to share it, because I think that, for me personally, you're one of the most amazing people I know.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Courtney's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of the Marine Corps history. Her service matters. Her story matters. Not every Marine's story is the same. We didn't all join the Marine Corps for the same reason. What is the same is the oath we all took, an oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.